The man on the ground raised his hands weakly, his expensive suit torn and stained, blood trickling from his forehead. His voice shook as he spoke, barely louder than a whisper. "Please, don't hit me. I'm already hurt." No one around recognized him now. In that alley, stripped of power and protection, he was just another broken man. Minutes earlier, he had been a CEO, feared, respected, untouchable. His car had broken down in the worst part of town, his phone dead, his confidence useless. When footsteps echoed behind him, panic set in. He ran. He slipped. And now he lay there, waiting for pain to finish what fear had started. The man standing over him didn't look dangerous, just tired, early 40s, broad shoulders worn down by years of work. His jacket was old, his shoes scuffed. In one hand he held a grocery bag, in the other nothing at all. Yet his eyes carried something heavier than anger. "I won't hit you," the man said quietly. "That's not who I am." The CEO looked up, confused. He had expected rage, violence. Instead, there was restraint, and something else, recognition. "You don't remember me," the man continued. "Most people like you never do." He set the grocery bag down carefully. Inside were cheap vegetables, a carton of milk, and a child's notebook. "But I remember you." Years ago, the CEO had signed a single document without reading past the first page. A company restructure, mass layoffs, no faces, no names, just numbers. One of those numbers belonged to a young engineer whose wife had just died, leaving him alone with a newborn daughter. "I begged for time," the man said, voice steady but tight. "I asked for remote work, for anything." He met the CEO's eyes. "You didn't even look up." The CEO's breathing changed. Memory rushed back, not the man's face, but the meeting, the impatience, the decision he'd forgotten by lunch. "Your company saved millions that year," the man said. "I lost everything." Silence filled the alley. The CEO waited for the blow that never came. Instead, the man stepped back and offered his hand. "I rebuilt my life," he said, "slowly, painfully, for my daughter." The CEO stared at the hand, tears mixing with blood. "Why help me?" he asked. The man answered without hesitation. "Because my daughter is watching who I choose to be, even when she's not here." As the man helped him to his feet and called for help, the CEO understood something he never had before. Power could destroy a life in seconds, but character was revealed in moments like this, when someone who owed you nothing chose mercy anyway. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of a child breathing softly in the back row. The judge adjusted his glasses, ready to deliver the final decision, while everyone assumed the outcome was already written. The man standing alone at the defense table looked ordinary, worn jacket, tired eyes, hands rough from years of labor. No one guessed that this single moment would expose a truth buried for decades, or that the quiet man had once been erased by the very system now judging him. Years earlier, he had been a rising employee at a powerful company, praised for his dedication and honesty. Then one incident, one convenient accusation destroyed everything. He lost his job, his reputation, and the future he had carefully built. Friends vanished. Doors closed. With no money for lawyers and no one willing to listen, he became invisible overnight, forced to raise his young son alone while carrying a shame he never earned. The man who now sat confidently on the opposite side of the courtroom was celebrated, admired, and wealthy, a respected executive, a donor, a pillar of society. Few remembered that years ago he had quietly shifted the blame of his own mistake onto a subordinate who had trusted him. The lie had worked perfectly, too perfectly, until today. As the judge asked for final statements, the single father stepped forward slowly. His voice didn't shake, but the weight behind it filled the room. He didn't ask for sympathy. He didn't beg. He simply asked permission to tell the truth, something he had been denied for far too long. He spoke of late nights holding a feverish child while wondering how rent would be paid, of interviews where smiles vanished the moment his name was recognized, of birthdays celebrated with apologies instead of gifts. Every word landed heavily, not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. The courtroom, once restless, leaned in. Then came the moment no one expected. The man produced a worn flash drive, kept safe for years, waiting for a day he never believed would come. Emails, timestamps, internal messages that told a completely different story, one of manipulation, fear, and a calculated decision to sacrifice one man's life to protect another's career. The executive's confidence cracked. Color drained from his face as the judge reviewed the evidence. Whispers rippled through the room. The truth, once buried under influence and money, had finally found air. When the verdict was read, it wasn't just a legal decision. It was a correction of history. The single father wasn't declared innocent. He was acknowledged as wronged, a distinction that mattered more than punishment ever could. Afterward, outside the courthouse, reporters crowded the steps, but the man didn't stop for cameras. He knelt instead, hugging his son tightly. "It's over," he whispered, not in victory but in relief. Some stories aren't about revenge or justice alone. They're about endurance, about what happens when someone refuses to become bitter, even when the world gives them every reason to, and about how truth, no matter how delayed, still knows how to arrive exactly when it's needed most. The rain had been falling since dawn, turning the bus terminal into a gray blur of umbrellas and tired faces. In the far corner, near a cracked concrete pillar, a woman sat quietly with a small boy asleep against her chest. Her coat was too thin for the weather, her shoes soaked through, but she barely noticed. All her attention was on the child's breathing, slow and steady, as if keeping him warm was the only task that still mattered. Years ago, she had lived in a clean apartment with framed photos on the wall and plans for the future written neatly in a notebook. Then her husband died suddenly, leaving behind grief, hospital bills, and promises that didn't survive paperwork. Relatives helped for a while, then stopped answering calls. The city kept moving, and she slipped through the cracks without ever making a sound. The boy stirred and opened his eyes, whispering that he was hungry. She smiled and lied gently, saying breakfast was coming soon. In truth, she had spent her last coins on medicine the night before. She pressed her forehead to his and promised things she prayed would somehow become true. Across the terminal, a man in a tailored suit argued loudly into his phone, frustrated by delays. He paced, annoyed, blind to everything outside his inconvenience. When he finally sat down, it happened to be directly across from the woman and child. He noticed the boy's pale face, then the woman's trembling hands. At first he looked away. Then he looked again. Something about the way she held the child stirred a memory he hadn't touched in years. His own mother, waiting with him at a station long ago, pretending everything was fine when it was. The announcement board flickered, delays stacked up, time slowed. The man's call ended, silence settled. He stood, walked over, and spoke carefully as if afraid of breaking something fragile. He asked if the boy was okay. She answered honestly for the first time in months. He listened, not like someone waiting to interrupt, but like someone learning. When she finished, he didn't offer pity. He offered help, food first, then warmth, then something she hadn't been given in a long time, a clear path forward. Hours later, as the rain eased, the boy laughed for the first time in days, crumbs on his face, eyes brighter. The woman watched him in disbelief, unsure how a single conversation could change so much. The man missed his bus, missed his meeting, missed nothing that mattered. As he walked away, he didn't feel like a hero. He felt like someone who had finally noticed. Some lives aren't changed by grand gestures, but by small moments of attention. When one person stops rushing, looks up, and decides that someone else's struggle is worth their time.